Hi, it's Steve Hargadon, and welcome to Library 2.020. This is Sustainability in Libraries, and this is the opening keynote. We're certainly glad that you've joined us. Our panel is here, ready. They were all in early and prompt, and we're very excited. We will give thanks at this point to the School of Information at San Jose State University and extend additional appreciation for support from the California Libraries Learn program. At this time, we're going to let Dr. Sandra Hirsch say a few words to you.
Hi, everyone. I'm Sandy Hirsch. I'm the Associate Dean for Academics in the College of Professional and Global Education at San Jose State University. And on behalf of San Jose State University School of Information, I'm very pleased to welcome you to this Library 2.0 conference on sustainability and libraries. Given that all that is happening in our world today, now is the right time for us to be addressing the ways that libraries can take a leading role in building sustainable and resilient communities. I want to thank our partner, Rebekkah Smith Aldrich, who is a leading mover and shaker in the sustainability space. She has helped us put together an outstanding mini conference today, and San Jose State University iSchool is proud to sponsor this important discussion. I look forward to our inspiring conversations about next steps for sustainability in libraries. Enjoy the conference.
Thanks, Dr. Hirsch. We're now going to hear from Greg Lucas, the California State Librarian, and I'm going to let you show yourself here, Greg. Please go ahead.
Thank you. Sorry. I'm Greg Lucas, the California State Librarian. Welcome to this conference. It's great to see people from all over the world. But you know, of course, from my perspective, it's even better to see so many people from around California participating. And it's a pleasure for the State Library and our new continuing education platform, California Libraries Learn, which we're doing in partnership with the California Library Association to help sponsor this conference. And next to resilience, I can't think of a topic that's more important to talk about today than sustainability, although you probably can't be sustainable without resilience. So maybe they're part and parcel of the same thing. With that, thank you, and on with the show.
Okay, thanks, Greg. And Rebekkah, we'll turn the time over to you now, and you can introduce your panel.
Fantastic. Thank you, everyone, and thanks so much for being here. I'm Rebekkah Smith Aldrich. My day job is the Executive Director of the Mid-Hudson Library System in the Hudson Valley of New York. I saw a lot of New Yorkers come on the line today, which was fun to see. I just want to thank you so much for being here today, and thank you to Sandy and Steve and Greg for the support of this topic in this venue. I think now is the time for us to be talking about this if there never was a time before. And I'm really proud today to be joined by a panel of people that I've had the pleasure of working with, some for close to a decade. And I think you're really going to enjoy what you have to hear today from the panel and as well from the participants in the standalone sessions. To our knowledge, this is the first international conference devoted solely to sustainability in libraries, which its day has come, and it's really exciting to be here today. So without further ado, I want to introduce our panel. We'll have a few talking points and then jump right into hearing from them, which is what you're here for the opening panel here today. So I think I'm going to start off here with Matthew Bollerman, who I've worked with for, God, Matt, I don't know, it seems like a very long time now. But Matt is the Chief Executive Officer of the Hauppauge Public Library. He is the first elected counselor to the American Library Association to represent the Sustainability Roundtable, which is the fastest growing roundtable of the American Library Association for very good reason. He is also the co-founder of the Sustainable Libraries Initiative, which we're extremely proud of over here in New York State. Next, we have Adrian Ho, who I love working with. He's the Director of Digital Scholarship at the University of Kentucky Library, so representing the academic field here along with René. And he's a current member of the American Library Association Sustainability Task Force, which has been in play for the past few years and making great strides on behalf of sustainability in the profession. Adrian's also a co-editor of an upcoming book from ALA Editions called Sustainability in Libraries, so watch out for that. Then we have Tracy Engel-Lesneski, who I unashamedly admit I am a fangirl of Tracy's. She is the CEO and principal of MSR Design and the current member of the ALA Special Task Force on Sustainability as well. So we're so pleased to work with her in that venue. And Rebekkah T. Miller, who is a kindred spirit. Rebekkah is currently the group publisher for Library Journal, School Library Journal, and the Horn Book, as well as a longtime co-creator for the Sustainability Initiative here in New York State, as well as a local library trustee. So she brings a lot to the table from her perspective and her experience throughout her work professionally and her volunteer work as well. And René Tanner, who is our co-chair of the ALA Special Task Force on Sustainability, is an associate librarian at the University of Arizona State University. And I got to meet and work with René first when she was a past coordinator for the Sustainability Roundtable at ALA when it was first getting off the ground. And she is a very big reason why it is the fastest growing roundtable of the American Library Association. René's also one of the co-editors of the upcoming book from ALA edition, Sustainability in Libraries, so double the reason to make the note that that's coming up in the coming months. So before we get started, I just want to acknowledge the world we are contextualizing today's conference in. I'm sure all of you have been impacted in one way or another by COVID, hopefully not by being ill, but certainly I can imagine your workspace looks a little different these days. You may know someone who's been affected by it or been affected by it yourself. We know that the financial crisis has caused job insecurity for many people in our profession. And we certainly know that the racial and social outrage that we see in our country this day is also causing, I think, all of us to feel emotional about the world these days. And so we offer this conference and the content to you with good intent, that the content will bring brighter days in the future. And so we hope you take it in the vein that it's offered and understand where we're coming from as well as where you may be sitting here today, because we certainly are all in this together and nothing has driven that home more so than the pandemic this year. So for the conference's purposes, we're using the triple bottom line definition of sustainability. And if you're not familiar with that, we wanted to make sure you saw it early on in the conference because we're not just talking about environmental stewardship here. We're talking about balance. We're talking about finding balance among social equity, economic feasibility, and environmentally sound practices. And this is something that libraries have a great lead on when it comes to social equity work and economic feasibility, but we need to make a much greater commitment to having environmentally sound practices and taking ownership and really a leadership role on the topic of the environment wherever we find ourselves in the world. And so that's why we're combining these things, because nothing exists in a vacuum. As Greg pointed out right at the top of the hour, that you can't have sustainability without resilience. Everything is tied together. And that's certainly a theme of the conference today as you go through the keynote panel, the sessions, and I hope you'll join us at the end for the closing keynote as well, where we'll explore that even more. So enough of me. I think you probably want to hear from our panelists at this point. I know I do. So I'm very excited to get started. And we're going to take down the screen here so you can just focus on the panelists and what they have to share here today. So we're going to start off by asking each of our panelists the same question, which is, one of the great things about this conference, I'm just going to share a little side note, is that I've gotten to work with each of these panelists for many years doing very good work on behalf of the profession and countless others who we weren't able to get on the panel. They only gave us an hour. But what I think is really important for us to start off with today is to understand where people are coming from on this issue. And I'm asking each of our panelists here today to start by sharing what personally motivates them to do the work to embed the core value of sustainability in our profession. I'm going to start with Matthew today, if you don't mind.
Yeah, thanks, Rebekkah, and thanks for the invitation to be here today. It's a real honor. I think it's payment for all the work that you've made me do over the last number of years. So I think for me, where it came from was I was involved with a building project that a decision was made even before I got involved with it to be a lead project. So this was the U.S. Green Building Council doing building to a higher level of standard, thinking about the resources it used and where its place was, and just the general understanding of that building. And I really was enamored with that whole process. I love the building process, and then this whole extra piece to it, which was thinking about the environment. And after that experience, I have a son, and I'd like him to kind of be on the earth for a while too. my thinking started to evolve about it. And I started trying to understand more about what a library's role is in helping communities to be resilient, to be regenerative, to be sustainable, all of those different things. And it really has led me down to this road now about mission, about that we have the permission as libraries to make these changes and to be leaders in our community on these topics. I'm a little bit like the Lorax sometimes, the tree. And I believe life in the community. And that's really what gives me this passion, is to do this work and to give many hours towards it.
Thank you so much, Matt. We're glad that your son's going to be around for a long time too. Adrian, would you mind sharing what personally drives you to be a part of this work?
Yeah, I got interested in sustainability issues when one of my teachers, Mr. Duncan Hunter, talked about greenhouse effect years ago. So he mentioned scientific studies about the impact of greenhouse effect, and he also brought out the point that it's not just a scientific issue, but it's also a social issue, because changes in the environment has a major impact on our lives. So I just thought that it made a lot of sense. You know, if we don't protect our environment, who would? So I have since paid more attention to environmental and sustainability issues. And now that I'm a librarian, so if I can combine my professional interests with my personal interests, that's the best.
Cool. Thanks, Adrian. Tracy, I'm going to pass the baton to you.
All right. Thanks, Rebecca. Sustainability in the built environment has been a major driver for most of my career, especially since learning in the late 90s that building construction and operations together account for nearly 40% of global CO2 emissions every year, which is more than any other sector. And then soon after that, I learned that most of the materials that go into buildings, from the structure to the building envelope and then all the finishes inside, contain toxic ingredients. And those affect the air quality of a building, can contribute to illness, even cancers and birth defects. So it was a way for me to make a tangible difference every day. We do a lot of library design, and I personally do a lot of library design. And so the impact, on the people who use our buildings and visit our buildings were really clear to me. And all these small decisions that we were making in our projects could either help or hurt. And I wanted my work and the work of my firm to make a positive impact on the earth and on the health and well-being of people.
Awesome. Thank you, Tracy. Rebekkah, you're up.
Hi, thanks for having me. It's really exciting to be here watching this coalition build, and so I'm eager to hear what everyone has to say today. For me personally, I don't remember a time when I didn't care about these issues. I was raised by parents who were of the land, on the land. They were hippies, and my father is a landscape painter, a painter inspired by the landscape. And so I've always thought about the land. I've studied it, watched it. And so it made sense then to translate that not just into like rare, beautified land, but actually the land in our cities and in our towns and in our buildings and our backyards. And so basically that worldview, that environmentalist worldview, infuses everything I have done and the way that I think about things as I move through my work. For me, it easily connects to libraries because libraries are interested in the well-being of their communities, and what's more important to their communities than the land that the communities live on. So thank you.
Excellent. René?
First, thank you so much for having me here today. It's a huge honor, and it's wonderful to see everybody's beautiful faces today and hear your voices. I can't think of a time when I didn't think about the environment either. I remember growing up and we had a tortoise in the backyard that liked to eat the plums. And sometimes we'd go to the beach and I'd be in the tide pools looking at the starfish. And then we moved to the forest and I got to go through the forest and pick raspberries with my grandmother, and she taught me how to navigate in case I ever got lost on my own. And then we moved to the desert and I ended up building forts out in the desert and really appreciating that harsh environment and how beautiful it is. And what a wonderful joy that is to be in the desert. And so I went through a number of careers before I came to libraries. One was painting, and I loved to paint landscapes. And so I had a deep interest in appreciation. And so when I came to libraries, I thought, how am I going to make this all work? You know, all these connections. And I started just, doing displays about the national parks. I started looking at the collection. What could we add? And then eventually I found the ALA's Sustainability Roundtable. And that was such a wonderful place for me to find a home, because I met people, and I met Rebekkah, and I met Matthew, and I met another Rebekkah right there, Adrian and Tracy. I met all of you. And it's just been so great to have that community. And I feel like our work is just going to continue to grow and evolve and change and meet the needs that we see before us. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Renee. And I want to make sure you know that you got a shout out for the painting behind you. Everyone who doesn't realize that is one of Renee's own paintings that she did there. It was very cool. Thank you so much for this first question, and moving into the more professional end of our conversation here today. I think we want to talk a bit about why library leaders and libraries as institutions are important players in creating sustainable, resilient, and regenerative communities. And Rebekkah, I've heard you talk about this several times. I'd like to ask you to kick off the answer to this one.
Sure, thanks. Yeah, I consider, community resilience at the heart of library work. It seems naturally to fit there. I mean, what's more resilient than a reader? What's more resilient than an informed democracy? That's at the underpinnings of library work. Also, as public stewards of our institutions, we have to watch out for the resilience and sustainable buildings of our own institutions, but also it makes sense that would extend to the forces at work on our communities that would affect the future of those communities. And so as I started to dig into my work at Library Journal and learn more about libraries, this is now a long time ago, I naturally wanted to think about how libraries could be leaders in thinking about sustainability issues, and started covering libraries and sustainability issues and sort of these things. And I think that the network of libraries, this community of libraries across the planet, has the ability to make a massive impact on this work. And so I'm very interested in how that could work. And so I got passionate and inspired by that. And I always just thought to myself, why wouldn't library leadership want to lead on this question?
An excellent question, my friend. Hey, Matt, what's your take on this of why librarians and libraries as institutions are well positioned for this work?
Yeah, like I mentioned before, I think mission is one it's in our thing, that basically all of us are here to improve our communities. The other big thing for me is that we collect stories, right? We are the repository of human knowledge up to this point in our communities, right? And our job is to help people access it, share it, bond over it, make art over it, whatever we do. And there goes my automatic light. So
at least you're saving energy.
Yeah, I'm trying. So I'm just not moving enough. So that idea, though, that we're there to share those stories, that allows people to come together over it. And I think that we can share a story that is basically trying to say, this place is worth saving, right? I mean, like that to me is a really big one, but we can learn from that information. I think we're naturally positioned to be one to have those opportunities to bring people together, to have those connections, and to be that catalyst for change in a community.
And Tracy, I know you also think a lot about connections. I wonder if you could speak a bit to that.
Absolutely. Yeah, in working with libraries and their communities, it's become so clear to me there's a huge opportunity for advocacy. Because if you think about it, what other institution is so trusted by the public, intersects with every walk of life, and in particular influencers and future influencers, can visibly model best practices in operations and buildings and even policy, and has learning at the core of its mission. So the ripple effects of all those interactions with different community members, policymakers, educators, future leaders, all of those impactful conversations can become impactful actions that can be visibly modeled. And it's for me, just the impact of those ripple effects throughout that are so powerful.
I think that's such a good point, Tracy, that trust equity that we have the ability to model great behavior. And the fact that we've got libraries throughout every community, every campus, every K through 12 school makes us mighty. And I think that brings us to our next question here is, you know, that really famous phrase of think global, act local. It's been used all over the place when we come to planning communities, environmental advocacy, business thinking, education for the future. From your perspective, I'm going to ask this next question here. What does think global, act local look like for libraries? René, you want to tackle that one?
Absolutely, yes. Thank you for that question. When I think about, you know, think global, I'm like, okay, well, we have big issues and we've got a lot to do. So, oh my goodness, I already feel overwhelmed. What am I going to do? And then I come back to act local. So what can I do inside my community? And I think libraries need to be anchors. It doesn't matter if you're in a rural or urban or on a campus. So when I got to ASU, I thought, well, what could I do to create a little community? And so I started a seed library. And at that time, it was a pretty new idea. And certainly not a lot of academic libraries were starting seed libraries. And what was really neat is like people started reaching out. They're like, how are you doing it? And now the library sees it as its own. And they have supported it. So I don't have to worry about it anymore. I don't have to go and make sure there are seeds in those cabinets. And so that's just really, really nice that that has happened. So we really need to see ourselves as building relationships. So in that process, I built relationships. I reached out to sustainability practices on campus as well. And it's so important for us not to feel alone in this work. And that when we reach out, we make those connections, we're actually creating hope. And so that people can look to us and they say, oh, the library has a seed library. How neat is that? They must care about the environment. Well, that makes me feel okay about my value system too. And maybe I can make more of that. So we're places of hope, and we're places, as Matt said earlier, to share story and keep story.
Matt, René brought you up again here, and I think there's something to be said for the work that you're doing here as well. And I wonder if you could speak a little bit to this issue of thinking globally and acting locally.
Yeah, I think, I don't know how to just reinforce that point, but I think, again, the fact that the public library, I'm at a public library, and we are looking at our community and we're saying to ourselves, okay, what does HOPOG need to be better, right? What do we need to do here that's going to improve things for HOPOG? And that might be much different than what it is even in a community next door to me. It might be what's different than a community around the world for me. And so the issues are global. People want to be safe. People need to be fed. People need to survive this pandemic. Those issues are not unique challenges, but the exact implication of those that are happening in my community, in my zip code versus your zip code, are different. And so I think the challenge of the library is to understand this really high-end 50,000-foot issue, but then also be able to dive in and say, well, these are the players that I need to help make this happen. This is what's going to help improve things for my community. And that, to me, is the role that I think that you wind up playing a lot is, and it doesn't seem like maybe it's sustainable if I'm dealing, let's say, with an issue that deals with economics. Let's say jobs are a problem in my community, or some other issues, but they all are connected, because if your community is hurting, it can't sustain. And so we can address any of those issues, and really we're working towards a sustainable problem.
So Matt, you brought up the issue again that everything's connected. And Adrian, I know that's something that you think a lot about when it comes to this think global, act local issue. Would you like to contribute on this question?
Yeah, so think global, act local actually reminds me of systems thinking. So it is a kind of theory, brought up by, if you're in management, then you probably heard of name Peter Senge. So there are different scholars, they talk about systems thinking. It is that everything in the world is interconnected, just like what René and Matt have mentioned. So what we do or what we don't do actually have an impact on the larger world, even though we may not realize it. So when we talk about sustainability, I think we actually should take a look at the big picture and try to connect the dots and see how we can leverage the impact of the collective actions that will generate most impact. But at the same time, I think, in this day and age, we have to pay attention to the political environment. So when we are talking about sustainability, we may want to see, what kind of context we are in, because in some communities, some people might frown on discussion of, climate or sustainability issues. So we just have to be careful about that. Otherwise, there might be some kind of negative impact on financial support for the library.
Adrian brings up a good point, and it's something that many of us have been asked about in our work on sustainability on behalf of ALA and other organizations, which is a fear of backlash in some communities when the phrase climate change gets brought up. And I'm wondering what the panelists might have to say, what advice you have for library leaders who might be operating in a more conservative community where quote unquote progressive issues might not be as welcomed in the way that many of us speak about them. And Adrian, maybe you want to continue your thought on that one.
Well, my suggestion is that we base our discussion on facts and reliable evidence. And people can also, talk about their ideas in the form of a story. By using a story, it doesn't mean that we are making things up. Instead, we are just using story or storytelling as a method to convey our ideas so that, we provide more context, and then it would be easier for people to understand. And at the same time, we can also tie our messages to some topics that people really care about. For example, health, welfare, safety and security. If we can kind of bundle, the message with some themes that are universally appealing, then, people may kind of resonate with what you say.
That's great, Adrian. Thank you so much. And Rebekkah, your role as a journalist, you have to do storytelling all the time to get points across and get the facts across. You want to talk about this one a little bit?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think, people want people, when they're being political about this, to discuss it as a progressive issue. I think sometimes when we're talking about this, we can talk about this as a planetary issue, which is probably a little more on target. But really, for people who are trying to figure it out for themselves, it might be best to think of it as it is, as a community issue. And libraries, as a shared community resource, have the ability to talk about it in terms of their own community, which can be as small or as large as it needs to be to engage in a conversation and discuss the impact that thinking about this kind of question could have on an individual community. So instead of having it be up there and out there and politicized, discussing about it in terms of what it means to us and what we can leave for the next generation, and how to be better stewards of our businesses and our libraries and institutions, but also that we can be thinking about it in terms of education instead of politics. So all the times when you can kind of place it in a different context that is really about information, as Adrian said, very valuable, I think.
Rebekkah, I know you brought up great points about this is an information literacy issue and that facts matter. And that's something that libraries are really good at. And it's just harnessing them for perhaps a more proactive purpose these days than have in the past, right?
That's right, yeah. Crucial.
Now, Matt, you're on the front lines. You're a library director. You've got taxpayers to answer to. You've got patrons coming through your doors that might not all share the same worldview. What's your take on this one?
Yeah, I think sometimes people, the world's whatever, confusing. There's a lot going on. They're not really quite sure where to put their energies. I think wherever someone arrives at, and if someone's, oh, not again, this happens all the time. When people are arriving and they're ready for a conversation, right? Whether they're happy with what you're saying or not happy with where you're going or that discussion that's happening, they want to talk. And I think you're always at a good point there. But to me, the argument I would bring to someone is to say, hey, let's say we're wrong. Like, let's say that, we're going to invest some money and the river gets cleaner. Is that really a bad day? Are we really, is that a bad thing that we're doing? Or that, you know, that the water we can drink, the air we can breathe. We've saved a vista in our community. Now we can see the mountain and now it's not developed. Like some of those things, you have to balance those things, right? The triple bottom line that you brought up before, and trying to shepherd people through those conversations about what would happen in the absence of the thing that you now have, I think is important. And I turn to something from a different kind of world, which is kind of a therapy issue, which is kind of cognitive behavior therapy, which asks the question, if you could change something, you know, what would you change if you woke up tomorrow and things were the way that you hoped they were? What would it look like? Right. And that's a way to kind of think of this, is to say, you know what, I really don't like my community, the fact that there's an industrial problem or that there's waste or that we have too much teen pregnancy or whatever the issue is. Well, what would it take then to change that? What do we have to do as a community to take the steps necessary to go there? And I try to have people think of it that way, as more of a visioning process, that, okay, so you don't like this conversation or what this proposal is, but what's your vision for this community? And how do we get there together? How can we move in that direction?
Matt, building off of that, is the real big issue here for sustainability is that no one can do this work by themselves. No one person, no one institution. And in many of the answers we got in that last question, finding allies was a big theme. And I've personally observed almost all of us on this panel here use the idea of co-creation, collaboratively designing solutions with stakeholders as part of our work through the American Library Association and other professional settings. And how key do you think this approach is to the future of embedding core value of sustainability into our work as a profession and beyond? And Matt, maybe you could keep going with that one.
Yeah, I think it's absolutely vital, because you know, I've had many different processes in my career where I didn't know where it was supposed to be. I didn't know what the answers were. I didn't really know where to start sometimes. I just knew we have problem X, and having more people around the table and saying to them, listen, I'm not looking to come out of here and putting the Superman cape on and flying away. We need to answer this thing, and I need everyone here to have an equal voice and in a respectful place to do that. And I think if you're able to give the purpose then of what you're there to do, people rise to that challenge. An experience that I had, and Rebekkah, you were there, and Rebecca Miller was there, was at the New York Library Association, the sustainability initiative that we were part of. And that was a similar question. Hey, we don't see libraries in this game of being in sustainability. Let's get some good people around the table, or really just any random people that had a little time available to them. And that really wasn't the case, but have them get together and start to talk about this issue in a structured way. And where does that bring us? Well, 5 years later, some of these products are finding their way out into larger conversations at national and even international levels. And so just based on, hey, we need a bunch of people to do some work for us. We found our purpose. Really great things came out of that. But if we hadn't done that, if it was just one person or two people scratching their heads together, there's nowhere you would have had that physical body of people helping you spread that message, coming up with those good ideas, and being fully engaged in trying to do this thing to the level it needs to be done.
I think there was a fundamental level of humbleness as well, for you and I to stand in front of our peers and to say, we don't have the answer, we just know work needs to be done. What do you think? And inviting people to do that work with you. And Rebekkah, you were not only part of that work, you've used it in other aspects of your work as well. Could you speak to the importance of that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that co-creation is a great way forward to finding a path to the unknown, right? When you don't know what you're doing, ask other people into the conversation, those that might, or those that have a problem as well. Part of what the NILA SI work brought to my attention was just how powerful it can be to say that this is a big unresolved question, and really we just need everyone's input. And not just like, yes, we need to convince stakeholders up high, or yes, we have to feed information sideways or wherever, but no, we have to engage in this conversation and build this conversation as a public entity, and in this case in public libraries first, as we started. And you know, that eventually you see how it because you think broadly about it, that you see that it's not just about operations, but it's also program design, and really it's about value alignment. And if you have all your stakeholders involved at the right place, you can get to mission alignment earlier, and then you can express that, and you have it in a commitment which empowers the organization to act, gives people permission to think about it, resources toward it, and it allows you to then go even further to bring in more stakeholders and broaden the impact over time. So it's a very valuable mechanism as I've seen it.
It's very powerful, I think, especially when we're thinking about true organizational change. To change the culture sometimes of a library and a library staff and leadership to come together around that idea of mission alignment, as you phrased it, Rebekkah. The invitation of people to the table to do that, sometimes you haven't seen that in your institution. That might be something very new. And I think one of the real powerful things about it is the diversity of voices that get to be heard with a variety of backgrounds that might have completely different perceptions of things or experiences that completely crack open why we haven't made headway on something in the past. And I think that diversity of viewpoints is that real strength of co-creation, which really means we have to address this issue of how critical social equity and racial justice work is to sustainability, and what historic issues are there that have held back some of this work that really needs to get done. Rebekkah, I wonder if you could continue on and maybe with that lens towards this issue.
Yeah, I think that, libraries are inherently about serving a public, and a public is a whole thing. It's not one part of a community. And so really taking that priority that's been articulated in the organizations around us on equity, diversity, and inclusion, and taking that to the next layer as our communities, as we all need it to advance, is really important to thinking about how our institutions function and challenging our institutions to keep deepening their work and their action on that. That's really important. Libraries are strong in terms of being able to be places where there's a reconsideration, a sort of a contextualization of history, of moments in time, of what we're experiencing now, places where there can be deep and hard discussions perhaps, but also a place where you can kind of go at any kind of inertia on institutionalized racism, on other really, challenging and hard issues pressing on our society and keeping us from being as strong as we can be. The library is a place for that. And that is something that is articulated as part of the mission of libraries, is to work towards the well-being of the whole community. And so it has to be sort of forward in the work if it's not clear. It can't be just passive, it actually has to be active, and that's part of it. And sustainability and a sustainable community has to be true for the whole community. So that has to be sort of activated where it isn't.
So Adrian, René, and I are in a little book club. We're reading a book called Donut Economics, which has been extremely eye-opening to some of our perceptions of how the economy is currently built and how it's not built in a way to produce a sustainable world for us all. And Adrian, you had some interesting observations from that book that really applied to this idea of diversity, the need for diversity and co-creation.
Yeah, so in the book, the author mentions a concept. Actually, the concept was kind of coined by a Harvard professor. His name is Joseph Henrich. So he was saying that people in North America live in a weird society. So weird actually is an acronym. So it's W for Western, E for educated, I for industrialized, R for rich, and D for democratic. So we, people in North America live in a weird society, and it has become some kind of, it shapes our mentality, and because it is such a dominant worldview, it also shapes how we view, what's going on in the world. But actually, I think sometimes it's good to think outside the box. Just to give you an example, I heard that in California, this year it is, the wildfires are devastating in California. But then I heard that policymakers in the state, in California, they have realized that indigenous people actually handle wildfires in a very different way. So they are now trying to tap into indigenous people's wisdoms to see how they can deal with wildfires, down the road. So it's a story that shows us that, sometimes don't get stuck with our own thinking and look beyond, what's around us, and we may get some inspirations.
René, I know you were recently inspired by this idea of respecting the wisdom our elders and people who came before us and indigenous peoples in particular your area of the country as well, right?
That's right. Yes, I'm so happy to hear Adrian bring that up, because that is something that that I really feel that we need to respect and honor, is that there's so much traditional wisdom from indigenous people, First Peoples, in regard to fire, in regard to symbiotic relationships. Here in the Southwest, the Dene call it the three sisters, so beans, corn, and squash, and how those three plants support each other and enable one another to grow and do well. So we need to really honor those stories and preserve them. In fact, we know that BIPOC communities, so Black, Indigenous, people of color, they are represented less than 1% in our archives. And that is something that needs to be corrected and worked on, because we're losing that information and we're not upholding those wonderful people who are part of our community. And so one of those projects that's happening is called the Community Focused Archives here at ASU. And so they're actually teaching the community how to save and preserve their story. So how do they, scan images? How do they do the research? And how do they create those records in our archive so that those stories are saved and preserved? It's so important. I was just reading earlier in September that actually Citigroup has done a study on the economic impact of our discriminatory policies here in the United States. And it's cost our economy since 2010, $16 trillion. So we've got to do this, and it's the right thing to do. And if you didn't know where to start, be extremely kind. This is a wonderful time to remember that everyone is hurting and that you can do great work just by extending a hand. Well, I guess we couldn't actually extend a hand without a glove on it, but at this time you can extend your heart and you extend your care, and that's so important.
Thank you so much, René. You're always one of the kindest people I've met in my entire life. Tracy, when we think about this idea of diversity of opinion, I know your work has taken you all over the world as you've helped communities work together collaboratively to reimagine library spaces for the future. And I'm wondering, what are some of the key things you've learned along the way that tie the built environment of libraries to the sustainable futures for those they serve?
Thanks, Rebekkah. Yeah, I just have to comment on René's last sentence about being generous. That is something that we've internalized as a way of approaching designing through generosity and really considering what the human experience is going to be. And that is just a thread through every interaction that I have all around the world as I talk to people about the impact that design has. But back to your question, one of the things that I've learned is the opportunity for advocacy that I was mentioning before, and all the interactions that happen every day with especially the influencers and emerging influencers that kind of can make a difference wherever with whatever they touch in their communities and schools and campuses to inspire action. René, you mentioned the word overwhelming, and I think that is definitely something that we encounter everywhere, is that people can feel overwhelmed and not know where to begin. And if something seems too big, we're less motivated actually to act. And some of the most impactful actions that we can take around sustainability just require a little bit of awareness to inspire choices that make a big difference. And this is made so clear, for me anyway, in a terrific book that's edited by the environmentalist Paul Hawken called Project Drawdown. And in it, he outlines the most impactful things that we can do today for a sustainable future. And the second largest impact is related to education. So libraries have an advantage of creating that ripple effect that I like to talk about for every action that they take. They can bring visibility to those unseen but impactful choices that they make in their operations, in their policies, and of course, my love, the design of the built environment. They can model their great choices. They can communicate them visibly. They can inspire curiosity and learning about sustainability. And really importantly, I think libraries can instill a love of place. Rebekkah and René, you were both talking about loving the various environments that you've been part of, and libraries can really instill that love by highlighting what's unique about the ecology of their region or their community, because people take care of things that they love. And one more thing that I've learned is that tying the conversation about sustainability to what it takes for a community to thrive is critical, because no matter a person's beliefs or politics, we all just want to live in a community that's healthy and vibrant and resilient. And the World Happiness Report's findings every year show that a supportive social structure is the most important aspect to creating happy, productive, resilient communities. And libraries, contribute to the social structure in a huge way, and library buildings play a role in how effectively the library can contribute. The built environment is a really potent tool, sometimes overlooked tool, but very important one in the library's service toolkit. And when buildings are designed with human well-being as the primary driver, then they support the entire community. And they sip resources rather than guzzle them, which leaves more for everyone. So I think for me, ultimately, the actions that contribute to that bottom line, triple bottom line of sustainability also contribute to a community's ability to thrive.
Wouldn't that be a wonderful thing if everyone in the world, policymakers included, we've all put people at the heart of the decisions that we're making, and human health as well. That'd be a good place to start. And so I think when we all think about how overwhelming this can be, the power of the library network is something that has, I think, not been harnessed to the greatest degree that it could have been. And that's why many of us are here today. And I think what probably all 5,400 of us who signed up for this conference may have in common, that we believe in the power of libraries and what we can accomplish when we work together. And so for the panel, I'd like to get your reflections on this idea of the very large network of library professionals that are connected through state associations, our national associations like the American Library Association, the International Federation of Library Associations, IFLA. What role do you see for those associations on the topic of sustainability? Rebekkah, I know you think a lot about this. You want to start this one?
Sure, yeah. I've written about this a few times. Basically, I can't think of a network like libraries. We are ubiquitous. We're in communities and in different ways in our communities, via public libraries, academic libraries, school libraries. We are statewide, we are national, and we are global. And we have mission alignment, and we have similar thinking. We can have similar thinking, and we are pretty good at sharing. We're actually really good at sharing, and we're even good at sharing with each other. And when we are thinking about building strategies and thinking about this, what can we do if we say we're a network instead of saying, I'm my own library trying to bat away at this? What else can we do? How can we scale our learnings, make it so that our best practices can go further and help drive the thinking so it's not just tactical, but also strategic in terms of advancing community resilience. So we have our own resilience first, but then also community resilience, because we're looking out for that community. And this network is very powerful when it gets activated. We see it on all kinds of things like literacy. We saw it across the country when everybody did stuff around the eclipse on the same day. We can have fun with it, and we can do really hard work with it. And it's inspiring to think about how if the associations that represent all of our libraries focus on this, and all of our organizations focus on this, how that can speed the work that the individual librarians and libraries are trying to do.
Awesome. I think surfacing knowledge and seeing examples and bringing things to life is very energizing for people. And Tracy, you brought to our attention recently a great program through IFLA that's starting to do that work on a broader scale. Am I correct about that?
You are correct, Rebekkah. There's a great tool online at librarymap.ifla.org. The library map of the world, and IFLA is using the United Nations 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development and its framework of 17 goals called SDGs for Sustainable Development Goals as a platform for sharing. So they're collecting and posting stories that demonstrate how libraries and information access contribute to every single one of the 17 SDGs. And I'll just put a little shout out for the North Americans on the call. North America is woefully underrepresented in sharing stories, and I know all of you have some, so please populate the library map of the world.
little call to action there. And I just have to say that one of the things I couldn't figure out how to do during this conference was get all the links we wanted to into the chat box, but I forgot this is a librarian conference. They're all doing the work themselves to connect people with these links. It's happened every single time, which is fantastic. So I've got one more question for you all, because the word overwhelming was used earlier. This is an absolutely huge topic because it touches on all aspects of the human existence. So as our conference attendees think through the next few steps of what they're going to do, what would you recommend they focus their energy on for maximum impact in the coming months and years? And Matt, I'm going to kick off with you, and I'll let you take that one first.
I think, you know, one of the first slides that you put up there, Rebekkah, was about the triple bottom line, right? And so to me, I would just start to get my head around, to me, you know, in my role, wherever I'm sitting, and then maybe look at a decision that I have coming up. Maybe I have to make a recommendation on a policy, or I have a purchasing choice that I'm involved in, decision that's going to, how does that triple bottom line affect those choices that I need to make? And that's where I would start. I would start with just trying to think through one very small thing, one minor choice that I have to make, some change that maybe is being asked of me, or some decision that has to be made, and take that frame and apply it towards it. And I think what you'll find is that the interconnectivity of everything, the thread that goes through it, connects to so many other things that all of a sudden it does become big. And to me, when that happened, it was like, oh, wow, you know, the fact what I'm choosing to eat for lunch, you know, has these ramifications, you know, that really go on and are much larger. And I think until you internalize that and understand that really, sometimes I think people make decisions in their homes and they think that their business is different, like, or their work is different. To make it where it's all of these decisions are connected. What then can I do to make that happen where I work, and where I find my community, and where I find my tribe, and where I find my people? Can I help those folks to get to understand it? And there's probably already some folks there. And so it's just tapping in with those folks and then bringing that connection to farther and wider places.
Cool. Adrian, what's your recommendation for conference attendees?
Well, I would suggest that we take a hard look at our own lifestyles, because honestly, social change starts with ourselves. So, you know, when I think about how I live my life, and I just realized that there are a lot of little things that I can do to help. For example, you know, when I go to a grocery store, I bring my own bag instead of using plastic bags. And before I buy something, I have to, well, I don't have to, but I would, you know, think about, do I actually need it, or is it just, you know, one more thing at home for no good reason? And also, I try to avoid buying something that is excessively packaged, especially, you know, some kind of unnecessary plastic packaging. And then when I finish using something, then I will see if I can reuse it, you know, just reuse the material as much as possible. And then when I'm done with it, then, you know, if something is recyclable, then I just recycle it. And I just do my part, and hopefully if we all do our part, then, you know, we can make a difference.
Tracy, what's your recommendation for conference attendees?
Well, I always have to bring it back to the built environment, right, Rebekkah? So for me, it would be leading by example in your facility and your operations. So it doesn't have to be a brand new building or even a full refresh of a building. You could just think about your cleaning regimen, finding healthy and sustainable products and instituting a clean regimen or a healthy regimen, and then talking about it. Investing in quality, efficient mechanical systems when you have the opportunity, relying more on daylight and task lighting rather than flooding a building with electric light. It's healthier for us and it's better for the environment. And again, just sharing the impact that those actions you've taken have had on, you know, air quality or staff well-being or energy use, so that people can learn through what you've done.
Nice. Walk the walk before you can talk the talk, right?
That's right.
Rebekkah, what's your recommendation?
So I'm going to kind of go at this thinking as someone who's been a trustee and how important it is to think about how one thinks about mission and how it's articulated. So I would say, go back with questions for your library leadership. Go back if you don't know, like how has your institution articulated and demonstrated a commitment to sustainability? Is it on their radar? Have they recognized it as something that is to be given attention to? And if they haven't, ask why and maybe become an advocate for that becoming a focus, of course. And if you are your library's leadership, take some time to really look at whether or not you understand and have been thinking about this in this way. And if you reflect and find that you haven't quite digested it, please do. Learn, ask questions, ask your community how that feels, and think about how you can move the needle from your position of leadership and engage and ask the questions that need, because there's a lot of information as well.
René, how about you? What's your recommendation?
My recommendation will be to start where you are. So whatever you're doing already, take a fresh look at it and see how you can make it more sustainable. Could it be in the collection? Could it be in the programs that you present? Could it be in the children's stories that you have? So think about whatever it is that you're doing, because everything matters and everything will make a difference. And also, don't go it alone. That's going to be my message. Find somebody who inspires you and who you also can inspire. Share the spark.
I think the programs that are coming up in the next few hours here for the conference start to reinforce that, to spark ideas, to get you thinking about this. And we just wanted to share, there's resources from the New York program that are freely available to everyone through the Sustainable Libraries Initiative. There's a little roadmap to sustainability. You could download it as a mobile app right now and take notes during the conference to kind of start mapping your own journey personally and for your institution through sustainability. And if you're feeling overwhelmed by all the different things that possibly could come into play here, we've also developed a Sustainable Library Certification Program, which creates a methodical way to use the triple bottom line to think through institutional choices, program design, partnership ideas that you seek out. So if you're interested in finding a foothold there, that might be a resource for you that you could actually access this very moment. And we also want to give a huge shout out to the resource partners that are out there. If you're looking for a community of practice, you've come to the right place. There's not just the Sustainable Library Initiative we've mentioned several times, the Sustainability Roundtable, the American Library Association, and IFLA's Environment, Sustainability, and Library Special Interest Group of the IFLA. Dr. Petra's here today. It's so exciting to see her, because there's a huge network of people who want to do this work and are getting better and better at collaborating and sharing. So I hope you connect with these groups, because this is the way it's going to work. If we actually want to make a difference, not just in our own lives, but band together to truly see a massive shift in thinking in our communities, we can help lead the way. And we can do so in an accelerated fashion, which is desperately needed right now. So by doing this together. So I just want to end here by saying thank you for your time. Thank you to our panelists for hopping on the line here today and sharing their hard-won thinking on this topic. We're all at different parts of this journey, but we hope the conference today helps to bring into sharper focus for you where attention is needed, where you can be impactful. And I hope you'll join us for the closing keynote to kind of close out some of these major points that we've been bringing to the fore today. But have a great time at the conference. We'll see you on the other side. And we know you're going to be doing great work wherever you are. So best of luck while you do it. Be well.